Good morning and welcome to another edition of Sharpe Takes. I'm delighted today to have as my guest Representative Robin Scheu, Representative Robin Scheu from Middlebury, who has been the chair of the Appropriations Committee. And it's so appropriate at this time because we have a government shutdown, we have one-time money from last year's budget, we have all kinds of monetary concerns going forward, not just with education, but with most every area of state government and delivery of services to Vermonters. So I'm delighted to have Representative Scheu here, and thank you very much for joining us.
I'm delighted to be here. Thanks for having me.
That's great. Yeah. And maybe you could start by explaining a little bit about where we are in the budget.
Yes. It's interesting times.
Yeah.
We are in our fiscal year 26 budget session now. The state budget runs from July 1st to June 30th, so we are just starting into this budget year, and we passed a budget back in May. I'm delighted to say that it passed out of my committee unanimously, which hasn't happened in a few years.
That's a hard task in and of itself.
Yes. So that said a lot about how we work together, which is really important. I'm grateful that I'm in the legislature in Vermont. And so the budget for this year, the total budget, which includes the regular state budget, the education fund budget, the transportation fund, for this year is almost $9.1 billion, which is a lot, yes. The governor's budget that he proposed was 6.8% over last year's budget. And we just went a little bit more than 1% over what he had requested. So that's what happened there. I will say that federal funds are $3.1 billion of the $9 billion, so they're almost 35% of our total budget is federal funds. We get a lot of money from the federal government, which is concerning right now, given what's happening in Washington.
Are there any projections, and if so, what does it look like now in terms of how much you have to vote? $3 billion are we going to lose?
Well, we are so that $3.1 billion is just the money that comes to the state. So that doesn't include the money that's going to nonprofit organizations or our schools, or public schools. It's just the money that comes into the agency of education, but not money that goes to the state. So there's a whole lot of money that's happening there too. So we've been keeping track of cuts and grants that have been pulled by the federal government. When we were back in session, after the budget had gotten through the House, we had agencies and departments and actually a bunch of nonprofit organizations come into our committee to talk about their reliance on federal funds and what it would mean if their federal funds were reduced or cut. So we started to get an idea of the harm that was going to be caused to Vermonters. And things were happening right away. At the time, even, the Trump administration is, there were key words that they don't like. Racial equity, diversity, inclusion, gender identity things.
Words that we generally use in a lot of our
yes.
laws.
Yes. So they were actually combing through websites to try to see if people had them on their websites and pulling funding if they saw that. So we had organizations and agencies pulling those words from websites before their money could get pulled. I mean, this is a race against time. It's been horrific that way. And I remember having the National Guard come in and talk to us about this. And I said, have you had any grants come to us? And he said, no, we haven't. But we were told we had to change our website and take all these words off our website. So, yeah. So people are spending a lot of time on language on websites. We really need to help people.
Yeah.
So we have about $3.1 billion in federal funds. We have reserves of about $300 million.
1%,
So
is that?
yeah, so
Right.
we don't have money to backfill everything that the federal government can take away. They won't take away 100%, but we're already seeing things happening. We just got word this week that the FMAP percentage that we get, it has to do with healthcare and the match that we get from the federal government. is going to be reduced for the next fiscal year by 1.8%. Our fiscal years aren't quite the same because the government starts October 1st.
Right.
But 9 months of that is going to be a loss to us of $13 million, just in that alone. We are also learning that
Excuse me, that's Medicaid mostly?
yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
So that-
and any match that we get to use, so it leverages,
Yeah.
other things. So that's a problem. We'll have to see how. We just learned that, so I don't know where the impacts are going to be and how it's going to work. We also know that, for example, the federal government reduced SNAP benefits and changed the rules around SNAP. One of the things they did was they changed the match that the state does. So often when you get federal funds, there's a state match. It might be 90% from the federal government, 10% from us, or 25, 75. So we had been getting 75% federal match and 25% state match for SNAP money. They're doubling that to making it be a 50-50 split. That's going to cost us, the state alone, it's going to cost $8.4 million. That doesn't include the nonprofits match for any federal funds that they get, that they're going to have to be out of pocket. So there are a lot of difficult things happening. SNAP also has changed the work requirements. You now have to look for work up to age 65. It used to be 55. Parents have to start looking for work if they have kids 14 and older. It used to be 18 and older. So kids in high school, parents have to. So there are a lot of exemptions that have been removed and making it more difficult for people to be eligible.
At all.
Yes. The other thing they've done, which is outside of state budget, people should know about, is, and the reason the federal government is shut down, is over the Republican refusal to continue the healthcare premiums for people.
Right.
And so if and the Democrats have held firm on that, and as a result of them withdrawing those premiums, we're going to have 45,000 people in Vermont. I'm not quite sure how many. I think it's about $65 million in premiums. That doesn't come out of the state budget, but that people's insurance may go up by 200%.
I think I
300%.
read somewhere on average double.
At least,
So-
yes.
So if you say average is double, that means
Right.
in some cases it's a lot more.
Oh, yes, absolutely. We're talking about tens of thousands of dollars could be. So what's going to happen is a lot of people won't be able to afford,
Right.
say, a $10,000 or $12,000 increase in their health insurance premiums. So they'll just go without. And then they'll use the emergency room in the hospitals as their primary care.
And the hospitals, some hospitals are already struggling
Right.
financially, and now they're going to, because they care about their patients,
Right.
they're going to deliver this service
Right.
and not get reimbursed
That's
for
right.
it. So now those hospitals are going to be even more
Yes, stress.
trouble,
Yes.
stress financially.
Yes.
Holy smokes.
So there's so many ripple effects. I mean, the federal government is reducing or eliminating certain Section 8 housing vouchers. There could be 1,000 people who don't have those vouchers anymore come sometime next year. And then if they don't have housing, we have more unhoused people in the state, and we already have a problem with unhoused people. We are putting a lot of money into housing. We don't have nearly enough money to solve the problem.
Yeah.
And as I've been reading recently in some books and other research that's been done, the housing problem actually started back in the 60s and 70s when we had zoning that came in,
Yeah.
and single-family zoning. So there isn't always an appetite for more housing, even though people say we need housing, but we need it over there,
Yes.
not near me.
Yeah.
And so the NIMBYism is.
Well, what also happened in the 60s was there was a pretty strong influx of population in the state in the 60s.
Mhm.
We're having some of that now. In my neighborhood, we've had smoke refugees and COVID
Yeah.
refugees come into the state
Mhm.
and buy up housing.
Mhm.
So that makes it even more difficult for the long-term residents of the state,
Right.
low-income residents. So yeah, there's a bunch of housing. Can I switch to education
Sure.
for a minute?
Sure.
Because one of the things that I'm aware that the state did last year, which I actually strongly disagreed with, was spent over $120 million of one-time money to buy down tax rates.
That's right.
So Vermonters who own their own home are going to see modest tax increases for school education. In fact, I think in this region, close to zero.
Mine actually went down. I just got my tax bill last
Yeah.
week, and in Middlebury it went down by a lot, but it had gone up by a lot. It's very frustrating. I don't believe in using one-time money to solve long-term problems.
Right. Yeah.
One-time
Which
money,
is what
it's
this
like
did.
using your home equity loan to buy dinner.
Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't make sense to do that at all. So I was also very opposed to it, and we couldn't have gotten a state budget. We wouldn't have gotten a whole lot of other things. We're not in a position to override the governor's veto.
Right.
But many of us went on record as saying this is not the way we should be doing business.
And the consequence of that is now, this year, on
Right.
top of all these federal cuts
Right.
and problems that we have,
Right.
you're going to have to, as part of the Appropriations
Mhm.
Committee, figure out how to backfill or how to deal with a hole
Right.
of $120
Right,
plus
right.
million in the education fund. Is that right?
Well, and so we had to transfer 77 million of general fund dollars to the education fund. So that was sort of our part of it. They also took money from other reserves that they had and other cuts that they made to get to the 120 million or almost 120 million that they had. So it didn't all come from the state budget, but a lot of it did. The
Yeah.
vast majority of it came from the state budget. This year, at the end of July, I also sit on the emergency board. The four
Yeah.
money chairs sit with the governor, and we heard our updated consensus revenue forecast for going forward. It only increased by $61 million, which is the lowest it's been since before COVID.
Yeah.
So we're kind of back to what we used to do, in the teens with budgets and trying to fill a budget gap. 61 million is not going to cover state increases in state salaries and benefits
Right.
and cost of renting buildings and all of those things. So it will be very interesting to see the budget that the governor proposes in January, given this. And so if that's the only size of increase, how are we going to cover the education thing? Because that's really a long-term situation. We can't keep putting one-time money in it. I don't think we're going to have a lot of one-time money
Yeah,
this
you
year.
won't have it this year.
Right.
And you're kind of painted into a corner in some ways, right?
Yeah. So he's painted himself into a corner.
Yeah.
That it'll be interesting to see how he chooses to get out of it. Because at the same time, we have cuts in food programs and nutrition programs, and all these other things that are so important that are going to do harm to Vermonters.
Yeah. And make it extraordinarily difficult to get through the legislative session
Yeah.
and figure out who's going to hurt and how bad they're going to
That's
hurt.
right.
I mean, it's not about moving forward and it's solving some of these problems. Really, it seems to me it's going to be like, where are you going to try and make the pain a little less?
Right. Minimizing harm to Vermonters is
Yeah.
really my goal, and how we do that and where we do that are the big questions.
Yeah.
We still don't know what's going to happen with the federal government. There isn't a budget, obviously, for next year. The continuing resolution has stopped. And as more and more Americans start to see what the impacts of this continuing resolution, HR1, that happened in July, I refuse to call it what they want to call it.
Yeah.
It's a big abominable bill.
Yeah. Big bad bill.
Yeah, and so people are starting to wake up to the fact that they're going to be hurt.
Yeah.
It's going to cost them a lot more money. Never mind the cost of the expense of the Trump tariffs. Those are taxes that consumers are paying. That's
Yeah.
why your eggs are going up, and crackers in the store, and anything, books, whatever.
Yeah.
Construction.
One of the interesting quirks in this is that I think, with the news articles that I read accurate, which is questionable, I suppose, but there is a tax break in the big bad bill. There is a tax reduction for income tax reduction for middle Americans. However, the costs that they're going to incur
Mhm.
exceed the tax cuts. So people
That's
are going to see this tax cut and they say, "Oh, this is wonderful."
Right.
Then they'll see the money going out of their wallet for groceries and
Exactly.
gasoline and
Exactly.
health care and everything else, and it's going to
Right.
sort of, in the end, it's a negative gain.
It's a negative. I've seen numbers from anywhere between $2,800 and $3,400 increase in costs for the average American when you add, groceries and insurance and all, all the other things that are
Yeah.
going up.
Yeah,
So
and my guess is that wages aren't going to cover that.
no, and the deficit to the country is going to go up by
I know,
billions.
it's shocking. When did we? In my memory, only under only one president was there a balanced budget, and that was Clinton. And the really big deficits run up were by Reagan and W. Bush
Right.
and Obama, to be fair, and Trump. These are the guys
Yeah.
that where the budgets just blew through the
Skyrocketed.
ceiling.
Yeah.
And eventually that affects monetary policy and people's everyday lives.
Yes. Yeah, it does. It does. So this is going to make it worse. Every budget projection based on these Trump tax cuts show that it's just going to cost us a lot.
Yeah. Well, that's
So
not
I know
very
that it
cheering.
isn't very cheerful, but I'm glad we're in Vermont. I feel like people of all stripes have the same goal of wanting to minimize harm to Vermonters, and that we really want to work together
Yeah.
to try to solve these problems where we can. And we aren't going to agree on everything. There are going to be difficult conversations and hard decisions that have to be made, but we are going to do absolutely the best we can to serve Vermonters. That's what we
Right.
can.
To move outside of your area of
Yeah.
expertise for just a minute.
Sure.
Also in the news today, the first map. There's been
Yes.
a commission that's been assigned the responsibility of drawing new
Mhm.
school districts maps for the state. And this one is actually, according to the news article that I read, is being proposed by Senator Beck and former Superintendent Falk.
Right.
That didn't sound like the committee was actually making this proposal, but then later in the article it did refer to the
Yeah.
committee's work
Yeah.
on it. It's pretty much what many people have argued for,
Mhm.
school districts centered around tech centers.
Right, right. And I read that same article, and I think people are going to be proposing maps because you got to have something out there to respond to.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what they're doing. And this one was one of the inevitable ones, as far as I'm concerned. They're going to have to still make some changes to it because, as I read, if they combine it just by county, Chittenden County ends up with 2 tech centers and 22,000 students,
Yeah.
which is too big.
Yeah.
So I mean, they could divide the 2 tech centers.
Yeah.
I don't know what those numbers are if they cut those in half. They didn't mention
Well,
that.
I taught in one of those tech centers,
Mhm.
and Burlington and Essex shared the same set of 10 sending schools. So they could divvy that in half
Right.
and do 5 sending schools for one tech center
Right.
and 5 for the other, and create the districts
Right.
around those 5 sending schools. So I think it's doable to
Yeah,
separate
yeah.
those two.
Yeah, I think it is too. And we have long, when you were chairing education, I know you talked about it then, and we're still talking about how do we incorporate the tech centers with the public high schools. We have a whole funding issue of the
Yeah.
money. These high schools don't want to send kids to the tech centers because the money's always the student. They don't want to use the money. Part of the whole education transformation is going to be dealing with that. But I think if we do something around the tech centers, it is going to force that conversation about how we're going to support the tech centers, because not every kid's going to college, and we need the tech centers. We need people who work in the trades, and you can make great livings there and support Vermonters. I mean, there's plenty of work to be done.
Yes. Well, I often ask the question, what problems are we trying to solve?
Right.
And when we look at problems in our communities, just try to find a plumber or someone to build your house or
Right.
an electrician.
Or somebody that isn't just about to retire.
Yes.
Right.
Or a cook in your local restaurant.
Right.
Just about all the trades that nursing staff and
Yeah.
hospital
Yeah.
workers, all those trades are desperately needed. And we're not training people for these students
Right.
because of the barriers for going
Right,
technical
right,
school.
right. I will say that we've done a lot with nursing in the last 6 years. We have, because we had all the money from COVID money from ARPA and the other federal funds that we had, we worked with the Vermont State Colleges, Vermont State University now. And we have some great nursing programs now. They're now able to train 1,000 nurses a year. They've ratcheted it up to that level now. And so that's an area where we're starting to have some success. And any of these training things take time.
Yeah.
And there's been support also through grants and forgivable loans for people in the trades as well.
And those would work much better. I mean, I think we do have some excellent training programs beyond high school. We
Right.
have apprenticeship programs. We
Right.
have the State College or State University
Right.
with some excellent programs. It would be so much smoother if students got the entry level information in high school.
That's right.
And that's where the bottleneck is.
That's
so to
right.
speak.
That's right. And there aren't always enough teachers,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Not to mention maybe not always enough students because they aren't being sent. It's too complicated to go sometimes if they're far away from the school.
My hope is that changes that come out of this school
Yeah.
transformation is that we solve that problem.
Yes.
And then kids find it, students find it seamless to choose to get some training in nursing
Right.
a trade.
Right. Or just explore it. Take a
Yes.
class and see
Yeah.
if you like it. Yeah.
And most of us are going to have to cook dinner at some point
Yeah.
or fix change a light bulb or whatever
Right.
that would be helpful for
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
introductory level
Right.
courses,
Right.
as an elective sort of thing for,
Yeah.
for high school students. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's the first map, first proposed map.
Yeah.
You know, the school redistricting committee that you're referencing is required to present 3 maps to the legislature. This may not be the final of that particular
Yes.
map, but it's a start, and they've
Yeah.
got to figure out. So they have, and that it's supposed to happen by December, so that we have a chance to see it and start working in January. That's one of many things that needs to happen over the next session. I will say with the school you can find a transformation timeline on the General Assembly website, on the Joint Fiscal Committee,
Oh, great.
on the Joint Fiscal website. This is publicly available, so I haven't memorized it all, but
So
I will.
people, just for the public,
Yeah.
you would go to leg.state.dt.us. No, you
No,
go to
no, no,
Vermont
just
Legislature.
Vermont General Assembly or something, and
Yeah.
Google that, and it'll come up. And then you could go to the Joint Fiscal Office is in there, and
It's
they
one
have
of
subjects. Yeah, it's one of the tabs across the top, and then they'll have subject matters, and education will be one of them. So they can poke around and find all kinds of documents. But this is the
And get that
timeline.
document.
Yeah, and this timeline, this is the one they're working off, is dated June 6th of this past year. So there isn't a more recent one that I'm aware of. This is the one. So there are a whole lot of things before we get to 2030, which is kind of when it should all be in place.
Yes.
And there are sort of off ramps or contingencies built in along the way. So if we don't approve maps, we aren't going any further.
Well, yes. So that's my.
Yeah.
Could you put your finger in the air and test the wind? Do you think anything can pass out of the legislature in the coming session?
No, I've talked to the co-chairs of the redistricting committee, and they feel like there is a path forward that we can get to. That was as much as I don't think they're there yet, but I think they are operating under the assumption that we can get to a place where that's going to happen. Are 100% of the legislators going to agree with it? Of course not.
No, of course.
And this is one of those things. Education is one of those things that's more geographic than political.
It's geographic, and it's public-private, and it's
Yes.
tradition in local communities, and it's urban-rural.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are so many
Right.
divisions or perspectives, maybe
Right.
is a better way to put it,
Right.
among legislators.
Exactly.
And one of the things that I've had a conversation with a couple of legislators about is that part of what has to happen to do something like the education transformation is that a significant number of legislators are going to have to look beyond their provincial district
Yes.
instead of voting for what's going to get them reelected or
Yeah.
what their constituents want them to do,
Right.
they need to think in terms of what's best for the entire state.
Exactly.
And that's not everybody can do that. That's a difficult task.
Right. And it actually should be our task on every bill.
Yes.
It's the way we should be operating. And when it comes to education, that's where everything
All bets
goes.
are
All
off.
bets are off. That was the phrase. Yes. It's just very, very difficult. People feel very strongly about their schools,
Yes.
and about public education or public versus private and all of those things. So it's going to be hard. But what's happening now, the way we're in the funding side of education, we all know we pay our property taxes to pay for it. But right now, if a community wants to do a huge rebuilding like Burlington City Schools, they pass it on. Part of that, we're all paying for it because it all goes into a pool. And so when people think about the local control and they vote on their budgets, what they don't realize is that their property taxes aren't directly linked to what they approve in their budgets.
Right.
It's all of the budgets combined,
Right.
and then the money goes back out. So we aren't wired to say, gee, we better not do this because it's going to affect this other town over here and their property taxes. We say, what do we want?
That's right.
And so that's really hard for people because
Yes.
we don't think globally.
It's hard.
We act
Yeah.
locally, but we pay globally. Is really how it's working now. So the foundation formula will be a much fairer way to deal with that.
That'll still
we get
happen,
there.
however. The money will be collected and then
Yes,
statewide and then
but
doled out, but on a more fixed basis.
right, and a fairer, and you'll know what you're going to be getting. A lot of that's to be determined, but the broad concept of how it's going to work. And the thing is, we can't talk about what that's going to mean for Bristol, for Mount A, for Middlebury High School, because we don't have the districts yet. We
Yeah.
can't do anything until we have the districts. So everything we do is so incredibly hypothetical as to be unrealistic.
Yeah. And the other thing that sorry, we just flew out of my brain. That happens. Problem we're trying to solve is in terms of delivering. One of the mistakes we made. This is where I was thinking about. Hindsight is wonderful.
Yes.
And one of the things we did not do in Act 46 that we probably should have done, we thought it was going to happen organically to close high schools, because the problems we're having really is that high schools don't have enough students
That's
to
right.
offer the kinds of programming
Right.
that they'd like to offer.
Right.
And so the other problem I'd like to see solved in this transformation is some way that we incentivize reducing the number of
Yes.
high schools we have in the
Yes.
state.
And that gets to school construction as well,
Yeah.
which is a program that ended in 2008, 2002. I can't remember the
Yeah.
year, but a long time ago, and we don't have the funding for that. So that's going to have to play into the mix as well. So I don't see this as the local elementary schools. I think those are pretty darn important and community based. But I agree with you that high schools are very expensive to run. And if you don't have a critical mass, you can't offer the kinds of classes that kids want. I was just at a meeting in Orwell 2 nights ago, and somebody from Fairhaven was there. Fairhaven is one of the ones that they keep cutting their budget, and they have kids who can't take things because they don't have, one kid who's really, really smart can't take
AP Cal.
yeah,
They
or
just don't have enough
they
kids.
don't have anybody. So we do have the virtual Vermont Learning Center. So there may be some ways to do that. I'm not so that they could take a class virtually with a teacher from, I don't know, Burlington or Montpelier, or somebody who's able to teach that class, or Middlebury. So there are ways that we're trying to look at doing that. But students are getting hurt by not having those opportunities. And so we don't have a substantially equal education, which is what the bigger decision requires.
Yeah.
We don't have it now.
So thank you very much for sharing your thoughts.
Sure.
It's been wonderful, and I hope the public has learned a lot, because you've shared a lot and helped me understand what's happening in the finances in this state. So thank you, and thank you for listening. That ends another session of Sharpe Takes, and I hope you'll tune in the future.
Want to be a guest on Sharpe Takes? Have an opinion you want Dave to hear about? Email Dave Sharpe at gmavt.net.